What does it mean to honor someone? It's a question that we usually wrestle with during memorial celebrations and funeral services. From my cultural context, we have developed a pretty consistent methodology when it comes to honoring someone. We print out programs with the faces of the individual that we want to honor. We sing songs in their memory. We tell stories as they walk down memory lane. We get t-shirts made with their likeness. And above all these things, we are known for crying like no one else when we want to honor someone. But the question is, after all of those things are over, have we really honored them? Because a memorial service has a way of making you make promises in the moment that are sometimes difficult to live out once that moment has gone. Abraham Lincoln, in his Gettysburg Address, was reflecting on what it meant to honor some of the soldiers who had died in the Battle of Gettysburg, which was one of the turning points of the war. And he said, to properly honor the men who died in Gettysburg, we need to rise up and continue with the same devotion that they carried to the end of their lives. So maybe the truth about honoring someone is not so much in how we cry, but in how we live after they've gone. Consider the celebrations we have for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We are very good at our methodology of honoring. We have church services and celebrations. We have concerts and we print books and flyers and t-shirts. We have marches and we have rallies. We have parades. We have dinners. We have all types of festivities. But when the music has stopped, when the preaching is done, when the bumper stickers have peeled away, when the t-shirts have faded, when the speakers are quiet and the music is silent, we still have to wrestle with the question of whether or not we have truly honored this man. Because honoring is more than just crying. It's also living. So it's times like this that we tell young people every single year that you too can be a change agent. You too can be a difference maker. You too can have global impact the same way that Martin Luther King Jr. had global impact. And most times we're looking at it from the perspective of the Nobel Peace Prize. Most times we're looking at it from the perspective of the March on Washington. Most times we're looking at it from the perspective of the radio and newspaper interviews. We're looking at the photo opportunities, the conversations with political leaders. We are looking at it through the lens of the limelight, but we don't often tell young people that in order to be a change agent and in order to be a difference maker, you have to be willing to do the things that have to be done when nobody else is watching. A modern example of this is an NBA star by the name of Stefan Curry. And Stefan Curry is regarded in his few short years in the NBA as one of the best shooters in NBA history. I'm from the Detroit area, and the Golden State Warriors, who Stephen Curry plays for, played the Detroit Pistons just a couple of days ago, and I watched as he took just a couple of steps over the half-court line and sank a three-pointer all net. Stephen Curry is a threat as soon as he steps in the gym, and a modern sports commentator said this about Stephen Curry. He said he is destroying the game, he is harming the game, he is having a negative impact on the game. Why? Because Stephen Curry has young boys and girls across the country thinking they can be just like him. thinking that at any point they can jack up a three-pointer and have the same amount of effectiveness that he has. But the problem is not with Stephen Curry. The problem is not how he takes shots. The problem is not how he plays the game. The problem is we are paying so much attention to what Stephen Curry does with the lights on and what people in the stands and when the television cameras are rolling, and we are not paying attention to what he's doing when nobody else is around. That he makes thousands of shots in practice every single week. That he rises up early in the morning to train and dedicate himself to his craft. That hours before he plays an NBA game, he has already made 200 baskets. He's willing to push and train and drive where there are no television cameras, there are no interviews, and there are no fans in the stands. And everybody wants to be Stephen Curry until it's time to do what Stephen Curry has to do. The term in our modern vernacular is a beast. A beast is a designation that we give to a person that reaches the pinnacle of success. And we use it mostly in the sports atmosphere. If you're the best basketball player on the court, you're a beast of a basketball player. If you're the best football player on the field, you're a beast of a football player. If you're the best long jumper or the best high hurdler, you're a beast of a long jumper. You're a beast of a high hurdler. But the moniker just doesn't settle in the sports world. It moves outside of sports. So if you're the best chef in town, you're a beast of a chef. If you're the best barber in the neighborhood, you're a beast of a barber. If you are the best administrator on staff, you are a beast of an administrator. If you are the best teacher in the school, you are a beast of a teacher. But as one of my favorite authors, Dr. Eric Thomas, says, everybody wants to be a beast until it's time to do what beasts have to do. And everybody stands back and says, I want to be a change agent like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. until it's time to do the things that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. did when nobody else was watching. I want to suggest to you today that in order for us to truly honor him, that we need to continue to live out the principles that he embodied with his life. The first principle that I want to share with you is the principle of vision. Everybody say vision. Vision. Come on now, help me out. I'm a preacher sometimes. Everybody say vision. Vision. Vision is a vivid picture of a future reality. A vision is painting a picture of something that you have not experienced, but something that you believe is possible. And Dr. King was masterful at painting vision. If you listen to the I Have a Dream speech, he's not just advocating tolerance for his kids as they go to school, tolerance for his family as they eat in restaurants, tolerance for his friends as they travel across the country. He's painting a picture of a future not just where people are tolerated, but a future where people are embraced for who they are, and a future where people are willing to embrace other people. He's not just painting a picture of a future where people's actions change. He's looking at a future where people's thoughts toward other people change. That's the reality that he was trying to paint. And in order to paint a vision, painting a lasting vision requires three things. First, it requires that you not be selfish. It requires that you not just live in the moment. And it requires that you not be superficial. And some of us, our dreams don't last because they are momentary. Our dreams don't last because they are superficial, and our dreams don't last because they're selfish. I want to suggest to you that every person in this room has at least one time casted a vision. And some of us, just a few days ago, when we felt like we had the opportunity to win $1.5 billion with the Powerball, we were casting visions. But the question you got to ask yourself is, how many of those visions were superficial? How many of those visions were temporary? How many of those visions were momentary? We had visions of the houses we were going to buy, of the cars that we were going to drive, of the trips that we were going to go on, of the clothes that we were going to buy, on how we were going to get our hair and nails done. Some of us were thinking about cosmetic surgery. We had some visions. But when the numbers were called, not me, because I didn't play. I got better ways to spend $20. When the numbers were called, our visions dissipated because they didn't call our number. And it's interesting to note that's how you know you don't have a good enough vision. Because good visions don't die just because you don't have the money. And maybe we struggle with helping our young people cast vision because we haven't been good at casting vision ourselves. We haven't been good at telling our young people that there is more to life, that there's a bigger world out there than just the friends you hang around with in Bowling Green, Kentucky. I was 14 years old when my parents put me on a plane. I'd never been on a plane before. 14 years old, my parents put me on a plane for England, for Cambridge University. As a high school student, I was studying speech and public debate at a school I'd never heard of. But ever since I went on that trip, and for a month, I spent a little black boy from the inner city in England eating scones and drinking tea. But ever since that experience, I realized that life was much bigger than my inner city neighborhood. And ever since that day, I haven't met a plane that I didn't like. Maybe our young people struggle with vision because we haven't been good at casting a vision for our own lives. Some of us haven't gotten past the experience that we've had in high school. Yeah, in high school, you were the best basketball player. In high school, you were the best football player. In high school, they hung your number and name from the rafters, but you ain't been in high school in 20 years. What other visions do you have? Maybe they're not good at casting vision because we're not good at casting vision. And the Bible tells me that when there is no vision, people perish. If we want to be change agents, we got to figure out how to cast vision. Another principle that Dr. King embodied was that Dr. King was willing to lead. At 26 years old, the Montgomery Improvement Association picked Dr. King to be the leader of the Montgomery bus boycott. So it's two questions you got to ask about that scenario. One, why would they pick this young 26-year-old preacher to lead this movement? And two, who were the more experienced people who passed on the opportunity? Because many of us have connections, and we have skills, and we have talents, and we have abilities, and we have accolades, but we are not willing to lead. Dr. King was effective because he was willing to lead. And it's something about a person who has ability and connection, but not willingness. That person instantly turns into a commentator. You've met commentators before. Commentators tell you how you're supposed to do it. Commentators tell you how they would do it. Commentators tell you what went wrong and what you should probably do next time. But a commentator won't pick up the mantle of leadership. And here is the thing. Commentators are not catalysts for change. They just respond when change is happening. The thing I like about Dr. King is that he just did not talk a good game, but he was willing to lead. You got to ask yourself, even distill it down. Where am I not willing to lead? When you look at the construct of your family, what conversations are you not having? What people are you not challenging? Maybe our young people are not willing to lead because they don't see us as being willing to lead. Third principle I want to share with you about Dr. King's leadership is that Dr. King was willing to learn. Here's a sad statistic, Mayor. Only 25% of the people who graduate high school, only 25% of the people who graduate high school go on to read at least one book from cover to cover for the rest of their lives. So only 1 in 4 people who graduate from high school will read a book. They used to say about people in my cultural context that if you wanted to keep something from us, you put it in a book. And it's sad because we have so much access to information, but we're not getting any smarter. It's interesting because when you look at the man that we're paying tribute today, he was not just Martin Luther King Jr. He was not just Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. He was Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. with a PhD from Boston University, who in his lifetime wrote 7,000 essays, who in his lifetime wrote 10 books, who in his lifetime was on the cutting edge of the information as it came to social justice and education and economics. But you only got to that level of prominence by reading. Maybe our young people aren't continuing to learn because the only thing that they see us reading are text messages and status updates and clothing labels. Former President Harry S. Truman said, "Not all readers are leaders, but all leaders are readers." And maybe our children would be convinced that education is important if they see us continuing to educate ourselves. Fourth principle of Dr. King's leadership that we should continue to embody is that Dr. King was a great communicator. He was a masterful communicator. He was just as good with his pen as he was with his voice. And I'm challenged when I encounter young people who can eloquently quote song lyrics and movie lines and television scripts, but they can't eloquently explain to you the vision they have for their own future. And I know what some people say, I was not born as a great communicator. I was not born as a great writer. Dr. King wasn't born as a great communicator and a great writer either. Speaking and writing are skills. And everybody has an opportunity to develop skill. And here's another startling statistic that over 90% of young people aged 13 to 18 spend 40 hours, the equivalent of a work week, spend 40 hours a week on a electronic device. What would life be like if you turned off the device and read a little more? What would life be like if you turned it off and talked a little more? What would it be like if you turned it off? And we know adults, we're not too far behind. What would life be like if we turned it off and connected a little more? The problem is not your time. The problem is your priorities. And Dr. King understood this. A final principle of his leadership we need to be willing to embody ourselves is Dr. King was not afraid of conflict. And he was masterful at managing conflict. That's a skill that's lost on many of us, so we take a certain methodology to navigating and negotiating conflict. But here is the thing, with some of the issues and challenges that we are facing, we are learning quickly that I cannot ignore every problem. I can't drink away every problem. I can't cuss out every problem. I can't beat up every problem. I can't throw money at every problem. Some problems, some issues, some challenges will only be dealt with when I face them with integrity and confidence, when I sit down at the table with people that I don't agree with politically or socially, and I'm willing to listen, and I'm willing to understand, and I'm willing to debate, and I'm willing to collaborate, and I'm willing to compromise. I have to be willing to do that. I can't run away from conflict. And some of us are stuck because our parents ran away from conflict. And as the adage goes, young people often fail to listen to their elders, but they never fail to imitate them. So what if we changed our approach? What if we just didn't cry out, but we did more? Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that we should not cry out. But what I'm saying is that our crying out needs to be accompanied by living out. Because here's the challenge that's facing most of us. Most of us are much better at crying than we are at living. But I want to challenge you to continue to cry out. Cry out when you encounter educational systems that don't do a very good job of educating our children, but live out the principles of education in your own home. Take your kids to the library. Take your kids on a field trip. Take your kids to meet the important leaders in our community. Take your kids and assume the responsibility for yourself. Don't just cry out, but live out. Yes, we should cry out when we encounter families that struggle because they're growing up in single-parent homes, and for one reason or another, the other parent was selfish and the children are struggling. Yes, cry out against those issues, but also live out principles that teach young people the value of respect and the value of relationships and the value of marriage and the value of treating other people with importance. Teach those principles to your children. Sometimes people don't respect other people and don't value relationships and can't stay with the person that they got together with because that's the only thing they've seen in our families. Don't just cry out about it. Live out the principles. Yes, you need to cry out when we face police brutality that we've seen across the country, but also live out the principles of being a good and contributing member to society that just doesn't complain about issues, but rises up and does something about it. Don't just cry out. Live out. Don't just cry out when you encounter preachers who take your money and do nothing to impact your community. Live out the principles of setting the spiritual foundation for your own home. And don't let the only piece of the gospel that you get be the one you get when you go to church. Don't just cry out. Live out. Don't just cry out this idea that our communities lack resources. Don't just cry out about it, but live out the principles that explain to our children that life is more than just a new pair of Jordans. Life is more than just a new cell phone. Life is more than just a new outfit. Life is more than just getting your hair done and your nails done. Maybe one of the things that we need to do is stop sending our resources outside of our community to people who don't care about us and keep some of those resources to help our own people. Don't just cry about it. Live it out. And if we become just as effective at living as we are at crying, we will be much closer to honoring Dr. King than any concert, than any worship service, than any rally, than any march, than any memorial, than any speech could ever hope to bring us. My prayer and my challenge for you is not only do you cry out, but you live out. Thank you.